Thank you very much. My husband and I actually lived here for quite a while when I was working for Human Life International, Priests for Life. So we were in the Maryland area, up in Union Bridge, and then moved to Front Royal for about 11 years while we were working with Human Life International. Currently, we're out in Denver, and I am the Director of Psychological Services at the Seminary there. So I have the privilege to work with our future priests, which is wonderful, as well as current priests and bishops. So it's quite a joy. The Lord has not blessed us personally with children of our own. But as I always say, my husband and I have 100 sons who are at the seminary right now, so they keep us pretty busy. So let me tell you a little bit about millennials. This actually, research started because the men are millennials, and we started to see some difficulties, especially as they become ordained. The priests, the new pastors that were receiving them said, how do you communicate with these guys? Even though they're priests, right? They're never in their office, we can't find them, they're always out somewhere. What's going on? So that began a little bit of the research, and then as I began to do it, I was invited around the country to speak at different priest gatherings to try to help just understand each other, and as we know we do, we need to know that we're different from every generation, and we have to learn how to communicate. And of course, technology has changed everything. Anybody born before or after 1982, I should say? After 1982? Were you after 1990?
I was 89.
All right, you're right at the cusp. Millennials are characterized as being born after 1982, but there is a little bit of an older gap there from the technology perspective. So we do say millennials born after 1990 are more what we call IY generation. So they're millennials with the I in front because everything is about iPad, iPhone, iMac, I this, I that. It's all about me. And every device affirms that and kind of distorts sometimes how we think about ourselves. So we're going to talk about how that has affected learning, has affected the brain, and what are some of the behaviors that we're seeing. And again, none of this is to blame, but to see how do we now try to come together and work together. And as you know, knowledge is power. And so if we can understand what's going on, that will help in that communication process. So let me just get queued up here. I'm going to sit a little as I do this because the computer's at a different level. So if you forgive me for that. I think we have a little slow internet connection, so I might have a little difficulty with some of this. But we'll see how it goes. There we go. Let's see. There we go. So here we are. Meet the millennials. They're actually the most diverse generation that we've ever had. So many positives. They're also the most educated generation, which is a very positive thing. Of course, the negative on that we know is that there's a tremendous debt that they've incurred trying to get that education, and that's actually causing a lot of millennials to not buy homes, not buy cars, live in urban areas again.
Not get married.
Not get married, that's a different reason, but not get married. And we know with an app you can call Uber, and if you have Uber you don't need to own a car. You don't have to pay for it, you don't have to pay the parking. So it is one of the things that's driven millennials to live in cities, specifically. Do you know they're changing hotel rooms around now where they're taking desks out of the hotel rooms because millennials don't want to sit in their room to work. They want to be around other people, so they'll sit downstairs in the lobby or in the restaurant, but they won't talk to each other, but they'll be on all their devices, but they want to be around others. So the desire for relationship is in all of us. God has put it there. But it's just a little bit challenging with technology of how to engage. So some of the things we're seeing with millennials in particular is poor social skills, poor relationships, and technology has been the product of that. So we'll listen to my Archbishop.
It's really helpful to study the different generations.
Can everybody hear that?
And to really be sensitive to the different generations, because it's evident, you know, the older generations often ask, how did we ever get to this point? And why are we at this point? And it's important to really understand the steps that have gotten us to this point in terms of the not teaching the virtues, not teaching truth. And so with that, there needs to be a real return to truth, to virtue, and especially to beauty. And I think that both generation, or all the generations, can relate to beauty, and that beauty is one that can draw all people to see the goodness of God and the beauty of God, and especially in creation. And because in every generation, I think that's the common thread, is the beauty of creation. And no one dismisses creation. And so, and that's a doorway, that's an opening to the encounter with Christ.
It's wonderful Archbishop of Denver, Archbishop Aquila. He was the first rector of our seminary out there. So what we're learning is being a millennial is not an easy thing, to be quite honest. There's a lot of different demands that were never there for all of us. And so what we're discovering as a result, we know that they're overconnected, and some of us are overconnected as well with media, right? But they're also overprotected, and that's some of the things that has been a result of the culture and some other things going on that we'll talk about. Also overserved, but as a result, the real challenge is they're overwhelmed. And they're overwhelmed in so many different ways, especially from a mental health perspective. We find more depression and more anxiety in this generation than ever before.
Can you talk about those items? I don't
We will.
understand that.
We're going to go through each one of them,
Okay.
okay? So if you have questions, hold them till the end, and then we'll go through and see if we can cover some of those. But let's look at some of these one by one. So we say they're overconnected. What does that mean? Well, we know that after 2007, text messaging overtook phone calls. There's now more texts that go back and forth, more than people call each other. It might not be our generation, but it's definitely the millennial generation, as we know. And 87% of millennials have actually stated that they've misinterpreted text. And think about that. If you're just seeing words and not the body language of a person in face-to-face relationship, you can very easily misinterpret someone's intent. If you don't hear the tone of the voice, if you don't see what really they're not saying through their body language, and if you're not looking them eye to eye, it's very easy to misinterpret things. So they've admitted that. We know, as the different generations, that we're used to seeing communication go from writing, as you can imagine, back in the Great Generation, all the way to calling, telephones. Remember when they invented that? Not the kind you carry around, but the one you have in your house, right? And then, of course, emailing. That was the big rage not too long ago when computers first started. But today it's texting. And we're really finding that millennials don't even check phone messages. They actually just check text messages. So for those of us that call, and I know my husband's in the business world, he always complains, people never call back anymore when you leave a message, even in business, but especially millennials in business.
That's horrible.
Yeah, but that's all they know. We have to understand this is the way they grow up, and we're not used to that. So what's happened as a result? Well, we have some statistics from people like Gallup, who have said that 40% of millennials that we even call hypertexters, and that's beyond the normal range that we would even think would be out of the norm, like 200 texts a day, that's a lot. Hypertexters can be up to 500 texts a day. Imagine that. And there's a correlation with people that hypertext, especially our teenagers, that they've tried cigarettes, that they're more likely to binge drink, more likely to use drugs, and more likely, 55% more likely to get in a physical fight. And doesn't that make sense if you don't see someone? I interviewed some of our millennial seminarians, and one of them made this incredible comment. He said when he would be outside playing with somebody and he'd hurt them, he would see the pain on their face and know he hurt them. But if he sends a text with words, he has no idea when he hurts somebody. And so he doesn't even think about it. And so what's happening is we're going down by 40% in the skill of empathy. And the skill of empathy is being able to put yourself in another person's place to try to empathize with them, to understand what they're going through, not what I'm going through. This way we can listen more and try to be more attentive. Texting does not allow that skill, that development. And so we're actually seeing that decline over the last 10 years, which is actually pretty frightening. And we see the result of it in all of these activities that we see on TV and in the news. But it is the first always connected generation. They're never without their phone. And, you know, we've seen studies with even teenagers where they say, just give up your cell phone for half an hour or an hour. And they actually become so irritated and anxious that they have to scream for the phone. One of our priests got a call from his 10-year-old niece. She broke her phone, and she called him and said, Father, you need to get me a new phone. I don't know why she's asking the priest to buy it. I don't know. He was her uncle. He said, what are you calling me from? She said, my phone. He said, well, I guess it's not broken, is it? Well, the screen is all cracked. I can't let my friends see that. I have to have a new phone. And she cried and was demanding. And he said, well, your birthday's in 6 months. Maybe you'll get a new phone then. But this one's working. My question is, why does a 10-year-old have a phone in the first place? But,
Amen.
but that's parenting. So we have to be helping and mentoring parents to make sure if they're going to do autonomy, and autonomy means allowing age-appropriate freedoms, that with every freedom there must be a responsibility. If you break the phone, you don't get another one. So there has to always be consistently a responsibility attached to any form of autonomy that's age appropriate for that child. And I don't think 10 personally is age appropriate to have a phone, but that's up to the parents, right? So because of these communication all the time, very poor relationship skills, very difficult for them. Face-to-face meetings, looking somebody in the eye, being aware of even the body language that's going on is very difficult. Focus groups have shown that they're short on patience, listening, and conflict resolution. And why is conflict resolution difficult? Because if you say something to me in a text, what will I do? Delete it. I don't have to deal with it. I get rid of it. So we don't have to deal with conflict. We don't know how to deal with conflict. It's easier to just get rid of it. Or unfriend somebody. We don't have to deal with the conflict to try to repair the relationship. We'll just unfriend you. Although I must tell you, Facebook for Millennials is out because the older generation is on it. So they don't want it anymore. She's shaking her head, our millennial over there. No Facebook. We want more instantaneous communication, like Snapchat. Exactly. Snapchat's all
replaced texting.
Yeah, that's replacing texting. It's all quick images, pictures with a couple of words, right? And then it goes away. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. So technology, though, without maturity, and that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about intellectual maturity. And the deception parents get into is, look at this brilliant child of mine at 4 years old that can use this computer and do all these things. They're definitely gifted. No, they're not gifted. This is normal. This is a very normal thing. But what they're lacking, because they're not being given the appropriate learning and mentoring, or, like we said, autonomy, emotional intelligence is immature. So affect, and that's the key that we look for, is can we responsibly behave in appropriate ways and let things affect us in appropriate ways. We learn that, right? Through failure, through trial, through error. They're not learning that. So very low emotional intelligence. In fact, we have a new word. I'll give it to you. It's called, instead of adolescence, adultescence. What does this mean? The generation of adolescents has now gone as low as 10 to 11 years old, because as we know, all kids want to be grown-ups. They dress that way. They see it on the internet. But the older generation don't want to grow up either, because they don't want the responsibility. So they want to stay free and have fun as an adolescent until they're 25 or 30 years old. And this is the coming home, not getting married, coming home after college, living with the parents. You can just see that whole trend that's going on. Adult essence, remember that term, right?
They
All
don't
right.
want to work no more. They don't want to go out and earn a living.
That's right. So it's obviously very difficult, and we know that there's an addiction going on, if not physically with the phones, because we know they're agitated, definitely psychologically. I can't live without phone. And in fact, here's a question for all of us. Do you sleep with your cell phone? Well, all these young people do sleep with it because they're afraid they're going to miss something. And this is a new disorder. It's called FOMO, and it's fear of missing out. And that actually speaks to a lot of why they don't want to get married, because I have this wonderful relationship, but a better one might come along. So I don't want to commit. So lack of commitment, as we know. And this is in a very simple thing, like one of our priests was working on a college campus, and he said, okay, what's your most favorite thing to do? And he said, go bowling and have pizza. And Father said, that's great. This Friday, I'm going to take you bowling and go and have pizza. And he goes, well, I'm not sure I really want to go. And he's like, but that's your favorite thing in the whole world, and I'm going to pay for it. Yeah, but something better might come along before Friday. This is just the mentality, this fear of missing out. I'm going to miss something else. Sleeping with the cell phone has actually created another deprivation, which is sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Because if you have the phone next to your bed and it's dinging all night, it will wake you up out of REM sleep, which we need. That's solid sleep, especially young people. They need, it's been proven, 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. That's disrupted. Even if you put it on silence, we know the phone vibrates. They're always listening for it, so it's still going to wake them up. And this is adults too, as we know. And there's also new research about you shouldn't have the phone by your bed because there might even be a cancer link to it now. So every reason not to have the phone by your bed. But we can't take questions right now, okay? But save them and write them down, and we'll get to them later. It'd be great. So just realize the impact that this is having on our young people. And one of the things they want to know, and of course realize now, we are immigrants. We're no longer natives of this country, because those born with technology are what we call digital natives. We're digital immigrants. We're now foreigners and aliens here, and we have to learn this new language if we want to be able to communicate. But one of the things that millennials are very desperately looking for, because they're so disconnected, even though they're connected, to reality and people skills and relationships, they constantly want to know, how am I doing? They want feedback, because they've been so reinforced growing up about doing things like being on the football team or being on the basketball team or playing soccer or whatever it is. It's all about what they do. They're so active with activities. It's never about who they are. If they're not getting enough face-to-face relationship with their family, and they're not sitting down and talking about just anything, then they don't know who they are, and they have very low self-worth in this area. They're looking for that feedback constantly. How am I doing? Check in. And of course, we know back in the day, even at a job, you got reviewed once a year, and maybe then you found out how you were doing. No, millennials don't even last working a year, because they might move on someplace else. They need that constant feedback, and it's very important for them, and they will be able to adapt if they know. So they're very much into communication, and you can imagine texting all the time is constant communication. So that desire for that feedback is not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing, and can help mold a little bit more about the character. Because really what we're looking at is, what is this person's character going to be 10 years from now? And I always say to millennials, if you post something, what is that going to say about your character in 10 years? Because that never goes away. So whatever you post, think about the future and how that will affect you. Because if you go look for a job, bottom dollar job people are going to search your name and look for every type of device that you're on to see what you're posting and what you're saying. Colleges are doing that now as well. So it's very important to be mindful of how all of this is going to affect our future. The second thing that's happened is millennials, because of the culture and the age of terrorism that we've been on, and mainly because it's on the media instantaneously and we watch it when it's happening, as we know, whether it's a kidnapping, it's a terror attack, whatever it is, it's constant bad news. Parents are growing up in an age of fear. And the fear is, I can't let my 5-year-old or 4-year-old ride his tricycle around the block without a helmet and knee pads, and I have to have a tether on him because I need to know where he is at every second. Or you can't go out and play in the backyard, stay in the house. So now the video games come out. This is not helping children, because not only are they picking up that fear, but also they're not learning risk behavior or taking risks that are appropriate, that we know they're not going to be severely hurt. But if a kid falls off a bike and scrapes its knee, like every one of us did, you say, I'm not going to do that again because I know that hurt. Or if you break your arm, I'm not going to do that again when I'm on a skateboard or something because that hurt. So if I don't have those opportunities to learn, I'm not going to know what risk-taking is that I can learn through my own trial and error, so that when I'm a teenager or a young adult, I don't do something risky, which is when the brain and the chemicals in a teenage brain is telling them to take risks, but risks they're not prepared for. Just on the news recently, a young man did these video games where you walk across streets with traffic. He went out into the street, walked across, because he could win the video game every time. And what do you think happened? Got hit by a car. That was a painful way to learn, that was seriously harmful, that he should never have attempted. But yet all the hormones in his system are telling him, take risks. But he hasn't learned that certain risks are harmful, which he would have learned if it was a normal play, a normal kid. Also, playing in the backyard and moving the whole body develops muscle tone in the way the body's meant to develop. The more sedentary they are, the more they sit around, the muscles are not developing appropriately. And so we have more obesity than ever before. And of course, we'll look at exactly what it's doing to the brain. Overprotection is not helping kids, it's hurting kids. Do you know today, parents, and you might even know this, not only when they take their children to college, they have orientation sessions for the parents to help them separate from the children. And they tell them they can't know certain things. It's important you don't know this, because they're trying to help them separate to have a life of their own. They negotiate grades for them. I mean, this is all good intention, but this again is taking away all of their ability to be autonomous and with, responsibility. So it's important to have ways to help teach children that, because they don't learn on their own, especially if we're not allowing them to learn on their own. Another consequence of all of the media is doctors are finding an incredible rise in nearsightedness among millennials, because constantly being on the screen is shaking and it just disrupts the whole development of the eyes. So we know that depression and anxiety, because of being so overwhelmed with activities, is really not helping them know who they are and that they're valued. And remember, the number one identity is we're beloved children of God. That's all that's important. But yet, seeking authentic happiness in all the wrong places, as we know. So developing strong coping skills is a difficult thing. And again, all well-intentioned, but the results of that are not helpful. So trust is very difficult for millennials. It's hard for them to trust others, as you can imagine, for whatever that reason is. So my question is, how do they trust God? And we know they need to. And Father Bob Spitzer, a Jesuit, has done a lot of research on this, and he says, we're just looking for authentic happiness, but millennials believe 20 to 25% that faith and science are contradictory, and that science is truth, therefore faith is false. And why do you think I'm doing science? I'm doing all this research because this has been proven, validated, and reliable over 15 years. I work with millennials all the time, especially our young seminarians and priests, to educate them to say, this is important, this is research that's been validated, it's well done, and this is to help, not to hurt. And I think that's the bottom line, because we care about you, and we want to communicate with you. We really want to know who you are. Most of them don't know who they are themselves, because they're not aware of how beloved they are. Love and suffering are opposites. I mean, think about it. You see all this terrorism in the world. How could a loving God allow all of that? So they hear God's loving, but they see that, and they say, why would I believe in that? So, all of this is important, but it's important, obviously, first and foremost, to know they're beloved children. No matter what they do, no matter how they fail, no matter what happens, none of that's important, because the real importance is eternity. And that we're loved by God no matter what. When a child is born and a parent looks at a child in the eyes for the first time and that child smiles back, what does the parent do? They delight. They light up. And so what does the baby do? The baby smiles bigger, right? That's a bonding thing that happens between a parent and a child, and that's exactly the image God has of us all the time. He is delighting in us for who we are, and He wants to look us in the eye and let us know that. But if we're so busy with media and every distraction in the world, when do we sit down and talk to God and look Him in the eye? Encourage the kids and ourselves to do this. A holy hour every day, a half an hour, 15 minutes. I tell everybody, especially my clients that are out in the world, I say, I want you to do radiation therapy. I want you to go to the Blessed Sacrament and sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament for 15 minutes and get radiated with love. And that heals. We know that heals. So that's a great tool to tell your children and your grandchildren. We know also that overserved is a problem. And what we mean by overserved is getting anything at any moment of the time. You know, it's all instant gratification. And this is, again, where we said that empathy decline has happened. But retailers and marketers have been marketing to young people now for the last 15 years. And, you know, just to give you an example, some of the music's to kids. Because I'm awesome, the world should revolve around me, you know, my girlfriend's hot, I bet you had her, you'd like her. I mean, this is all about narcissism. And this is what's developing in a lot of young people. They're so low self-worth, which is really what narcissism is, but I have to prove that I'm better than you, and I'll bring you down to my level so that I feel better about myself. Narcissism is important, is shame-based fear. It's a shame-based fear of being ordinary. I'm so afraid I'll just be ordinary, and when you think of it, when they look at the internet and scan and look at all this, what are they seeing? These prodigies that are doing miraculous things, and I have to be as good as that person. Everybody must be like that. I have to be better than them. That's wrong. That's not what the world is like. Yet that's the impression they get from looking on the internet. Or somebody starts a new company and they're a millionaire overnight, like Zuckerberg, right, from Facebook. So it's shame-based fear of being ordinary, which cannot be cured by more shame. And that's what happens. We can't shame them. We have to help them. So, for example, a response that I would give to someone who's starting to become a little narcissistic, it's all about them, I have to do this for me. I say, you know, it might be really good for you to serve others that are less special than you, because I know you're special, but if you serve others that are less special and make them feel special, help them try to help other people, because once they start to serve other people and help other people, it gets them out of themselves, and that's the best way to try to cure people like this. You know, researchers have found that children who are not protected and are able to do what I was talking about, have autonomous experiences and responsibility, whether it's riding a bike, falling off of it, getting hurt, do what's called mastery experiences. They master the experience of failing. They master the experience of making a decision in the future not to do something because this hurt. And they become, and it's shown, more optimistic, decisive, and capable of overcoming adversity and achieving goals. Those that aren't able to test those abilities are emotionally brittle young adults who are more vulnerable to anxiety and depression and fear commitment. And here's your analogy. 1944, you gentlemen will probably remember these days of my father. 18-year-olds stormed the beaches of Normandy to sure death. Today, 18-year-olds need a safe place on college campuses when their feelings get hurt. Something is wrong with that picture, as we know. But that's because they haven't had mastery experiences, so we can't blame them. We're at fault because we haven't provided them those opportunities, which is important to remember. And so, as a result of all of this, the portrait of a millennial is they're overwhelmed, and you can see why. It's a lot to live up to, as you can imagine, if you don't have the skills. 48% are going to counseling for mental health concerns, and this is on college campuses. 10% have been hospitalized for mental health. We have more prescription drugs out there than we've ever seen in our life for depression and anxiety. over an 8 to 10% of attempted suicide. In high schools, we see this more and more. As a matter of fact, a teacher friend of mine just wants to quit her job because these kids are coming to her saying they want to kill themselves. She doesn't know what to do, how to handle that. 30% have thought about committing suicide. So you can see how overwhelmed they're becoming. And the stress comes from multiple places. External sources, like pressure to perform. If everyone gets a participation trophy, what do they think? I must be really good at this. And then when they try to do something like that again and they're not good at it, they're devastated. What's wrong with me? Pressure to perform, even with schoolwork, whatever it is, makes life transition difficult into the world. Or internal sources, which they self-impose, is competition. They're always comparing themselves to everybody on the internet or everybody around them. I have to be as good as this person. You can see how frustrating that would become. Especially if they've been told you're the best at this, and they start to believe it. And so what's happening is they're starting to realize when they get to a certain age, somebody hasn't been telling me the truth. Something is wrong because I've been told how special and unique and wonderful I am and got these trophies, and it isn't matching up to what I know of myself as I learn more about myself. And so this is causing great anxiety for them and great distrust, as you can imagine. And they don't know what to do with that because they haven't learned how to self-regulate their emotions. Because their emotions have never caught up with their intellect, or I should say their intellect hasn't caught up with their emotions. They're so delayed in emotional development because everything comes instantaneously. And this is the number one problem with millennials, is what we call artificial intelligence or lack of emotional maturity. So they don't get enough sleep and they find artificial ways to cope. The two best ways that we've found in research is push back and get lost in the virtual world of online fantasy, gaming, texting, become someone else in the virtual world, or become super kid and fall into the performance trap of perfectionism where I try to exceed even my own expectations. And as you know, that can become quite frustrating because it's not going to be easy to do. So what's happened to the millennial brain? We actually found that they're developing completely differently because of the media and all the images. And what's happened is they've shifted from left brain learners to right brain learners. It's a rewiring of the brain. All that constant stream of stimuli is causing this shift. And their world is full of speed, convenience, entertainment, nurture, and of course entitlement. I should have this, this sense. They don't understand that slow is good because I build patience, or hard is good because I build interpersonal skills if I am face-to-face with someone, or boring is good because they get bored very easily with all of that excitement coming in with bursts of dopamine that get released, and then as soon as it's released, it crashes and I need more, and if I don't have it, I'm bored. Nothing can satisfy my hunger for that dopamine boost, as you can imagine, which is coming through the internet. So boring becomes bad, but it really is building perseverance, and we need to teach them that. Risk is not bad either. It's the way we learn to build courage. And labor is a good thing because then I appreciate work ethic. I think every young person should go out and build houses for humanity, Habitat for Humanity, or go on mission trips. Do something with the poor that they're serving others and see how good and well off they are. It actually really works, and we found this so many times. The bottom line is they have more knowledge and more information than we ever did in our lifetime, but no way to understand or interpret it. They don't have the wisdom to interpret it. And what's missing for them are the mentors that we had growing up, like teachers, coaches, and family, because if families are broken, or they're busy, or they're working, or they're not around, who are they going to but their peers? And that's the blind leading the blind, as we know. So mentors are very important for millennials. We all need mentors. I even have mentors as a psychologist. I look for them. I find them. We encourage priests to have priest mentors. We need to have mentors to keep us accountable for our own actions and behaviors so that we can have that character that we want in 10 years from now. And so their learning style is completely different. You know, if you look at our own, what was important when we were coming from whatever generation, you know, we had morals and values and ethics. That's not that important anymore. It's all about technology, as you can see. And also, you know, no moral compass, because who's giving it to them if the mentors aren't there? It's all the media. It's everything on the internet. It's the schools they're going to. They're getting attacked from every possible angle, as you can imagine. So it's really important to find mentors for these young people so that they can be developed. And the great news, God created is so malleable that we can't say it's hopeless or it's too late. It's never too late. Even at our age, it's never too late. Constantly molding, and we can change, and we know we can change no matter how old we are. But if we don't have the right incentive or the right mentors, then it's going to be very difficult. So how do they communicate? Obviously, selfies, as we know. We have all of that. Questions. They want feedback. They want to be part of the discussion and included. But don't ask their opinion if you're not going to listen to it. They want to know you really care about them. And they want to be pursued. Every conversion story that I've heard from a millennial is, this person invited me on a retreat. They called me to remind me, and I said, well, I don't know. They sent me a text. They showed up at my door, picked me up, drove me to the retreat, and paid for it. And then they have a conversion. This guy really cared about me personally. They don't know what that's like. If we're too busy, they don't have that same feeling, that bonding that went on over a lifetime that we might have had. So pursuing them in every situation is so important to know that. We have to go out of our way to teach them how to die for others. We have to die to ourselves to do that. And they like to self-express, you know. We see so much in the tattoo area, the piercing area. You know, as a matter of fact, 25% have posted things about themselves. I believe this is probably a lot higher than that, as we know, especially with selfies. And it is the most tattooed generation that we've ever seen. And when I talk, you know, when you talk about tattoos, it's like, well, I want to be different. Okay, everyone's different now. So if you're not tattooed, you're different, actually. That's kind of how it's working out, I think. So you can see it's the most tattooed generation, most ear piercing or piercings, as you can see, that's happened. And so it's an attempt, obviously, to be different, to express, because they don't know how to express their emotions. They haven't learned that maturity of how to express their emotions. And so that's part of it that's so important. So it's just important. We'll listen a little bit to what they say.
Express myself. How do I like to express myself? That's a great question. I think that's the hardest question to ask a millennial. Because one,
This
those
guy was
tattoos,
a pot smoker.
those
He did it
earrings,
all.
those piercings, those are fake. That's not how they like to express themselves.
Marijuana.
Yeah, that's just an appearance. That's just fake. So when you ask them, like, they'll falsely identify with that. You know, I used to falsely identify with partying, and then after that I falsely identified with, oh, because I, you know, dressed like this. That's how I express myself. But it's all false. So now, how do I express myself? In prayer.
I ran an Instagram account that had to do with my traveling experiences. So I'm a budget traveler, is the term that I like to use. So I used the Instagram as a platform of creative expression. When I would travel, I'd take a gazillion pictures, so then I would come back and edit them and start sharing them. What I eventually started doing as seminary became more of a reality for me is I started putting quotes, either relating to the faith or not, or little reflections underneath my travel pictures. And then was trying to branch out kind of into the religious realm as well. So then I had travel and spirituality kind of combining, and then was trying to build a following to kind of, I guess, in terms of like self-expression, creativity, kind of like a nice outlet in that regard.
Millennials can be very cautious about commitment. I think that's definitely true. I think you can also see that they want to commit, but they're afraid. I think for a lot of people, a tattoo is a way of showing a commitment to something that they want to have for the rest of their lives. Thinking about what St. Augustine said, our hearts are restless until they rest in you, God. I think that really applies to a lot of millennials. Very restless, don't really know where to settle down, and are very afraid of commitment, but at the same time know that it's what they need. So my tattoo is a cross, and it was something I considered for a while, because I was starting to understand my faith more and what that sacrifice of Christ really meant, and I didn't want to lose that. I was so afraid that it was going to be a phase, and then I wouldn't care anymore. So I got a tattoo just to show myself that my faith was something permanent that I could hold on to for the rest of my life.
I mean, what I enjoyed the most of social media was Instagram, and I think because there's so many ways to express yourself in photos, and I guess it's the beauty aspect that spoke to me, at least more in the way of what I see some people post. It's definitely seems like a cry to be heard, usually in the wrong way. Yeah, whether like the connection between social media and tattoos and piercings, like as if it's, I don't know, a way millennials feel that they need to somehow desperately express themselves, that they are putting so much energy into these things.
So interesting, huh? Who would have thought about the tattoo as a commitment to God, right? So it's really important for all of us to come together because we know together we're better, right? We can start to understand where each other's coming from. And we do know that we're all seeking the same thing as individuals, and this is the way God created us. And that is that we all have the same universal needs. We all want to feel respected. We all want to feel valued. And you can see it in the tones of those millennials. They're beautiful, beautiful people. Great hearts. Led astray for periods of time because of the culture and the media. They want a personal connection. Like she said, she wants to make a commitment, but she's so afraid of it. To the point she had to make a tattoo because she didn't think she could keep a commitment without that reminder. And autonomy, but autonomy without responsibility is not safe. Autonomy must always have a responsibility behind it, which is very important. So what do? There's great potential for millennials. They are probably the greatest generation because they have the most potential. But it needs to be directed, and it needs to be mentored. And so I encourage any kind of mentors. We can be mentors to millennials all around us all the time. Instead of being afraid of them, as parents, if they have an account, ask to see their posts. Talk about it. Find out what they're doing. And again, ask that question. In 10 years from now, if you post this, what's that going to say about your character? It's all about the personal relationship. It's all about being pursued and thinking someone really cares about me for who I am, not what I do. I know I can't be those superstars all the time, and I keep trying. But do you love me anyway? And if parents aren't around because they're busy, or people are too busy to find that out, and so many of these young men that come to me, they love their fathers, and their fathers, I think, try to involve them, but so many times I hear, yeah, I wanted to help my dad, but he kept telling me I was making a mistake with it, and he'd tell me to go away because he'd finish it. Do you know what that does to a child? They feel they have no worth. So I love this story. A father said, you know what? I went and got an automobile engine that no longer worked. I brought it home for my son. I think he was 13 or 14 years old. I gave it to him and said, for the summer, and we took it all apart. And he says, for the summer, I want you to put it back together. He couldn't destroy it. It was already not working. This kid spent the whole summer putting this engine back together. and learned he loved to be mechanical. And so now he's a mechanical engineer, he works with cars. How do they discover their gifts and talents if we don't give them opportunities and let them fail? But don't have them do something that's so valuable to you that you're going to get upset with them, because that's not going to help. So we have to give them the right way. Remember, autonomy with responsibility. And we will develop and hone in those skills. We have a wood shop at the seminary. Men go and they start to make things and they discover, I love making wood things. They made a whole set of pews for the Archbishop. Do you know how proud they were of that? They're permanently in his chapel. They're not even from a diocese, from other dioceses. But such a sense of accomplishment in their skills and their talents. They're not perfect, but it's something they created. So it's important for them to find all this out. We need to create those opportunities for them. So as you know, the generation above millennials, it's important for us to be not just teachers but coaches. Let them know how they're doing. Constantly, they need that feedback, we need to be giving it. But as a coach, also encouraging, not criticizing, or you're not good enough. And I hear these stories over and over, and some coaches that treat some of these kids in their team sports is terrible. And be mentors. Well, that means a mentor means inspire them. Give them, give them encouragement for it, which is so important. And then I'm going to finish with a video of some priests that tell you about some of these positive aspects, because they have great wisdom.
Yeah, one way that we connect with the guys is through imagery, in the sense of leading them to beauty. When we lead them to beauty and then we connect it with a religious experience, we connect it with something that they're rather familiar with, like the Mass. And the beauty coming through art and architecture, through music, then they see a connection, they understand a connection between that and God. And I think the beauty leads them right to the heart of God, and they're much more willing to listen when that connection is made for them. One thing that I see is they're willing to work in groups, and they're willing to coordinate their efforts with the efforts of the group. So it's kind of easy to work with them in some ways, and as long as there's good leadership and a solid direction, they're willing to follow, they're willing to join in. And pitch in for the sake of the group and for the sake of the mission. And I also see that they're really good at dialogue. I find that they're rather open to listening, echoing back what I've heard them say, gives them a real sense of belonging and a sense that they've begun to grasp the truths that were communicated previously. And I think even helps them integrate the material that's been offered. They're very much looking for a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of being engaged in something that's larger than themselves. A truth that they will engage more if they're receiving that positive feedback and letting them know kind of where they stand in things. And if they're not going in the right direction, kind of bringing them back gently through some reinforcement, and they will re-engage in the overall process. And I find that I need to be rather careful in how I do that, how I engage them with some positive feedback. Because if it's received as some sort of dissing their opinion, or if it's not respecting them as a person, they'll see it as some sort of attack. And then it's counterproductive, and then they're moving further away, and they're disengaging at that point. But we should see the millennials as a great opportunity in the church, because of their ability to work for a greater goal. And when they get sight of that goal, when they get sight of Christ Jesus working in the world, their hearts are given over quite quickly to the mission of the church. And we need to take advantage of that, harness that energy, so that the gospel of Christ might be proclaimed.
They have a lot of optimism and idealism. And when you can present to them a vision of living the faith that is challenging and adventurous, that really calls out what's best in them, people respond. I think millennials have a lot of care and concern for people who are struggling in different ways. And if you can help them have a vision for how to attend to those needs in a fruitful and effective way, they really respond with tremendous generosity.
So hopefully that's gives some hope, and I hope some education. Remember, knowledge is power, and we're so blessed. And let's tell our millennials how great they are appropriately. Not overgrade. They're like the rest of us. All right, thanks very much.